Sisi could have offered any number of explanations as to why it was so different. Had someone asked her, it would have been simple enough for her to provide an answer. But what was the truth, she wondered? Why was it that twilight, here in Gördele, her country estate just outside of Budapest, felt so different from twilight in Vienna? She might have said that it was the view, the unruly, wild, perfectly inviting view. Here, in the soft light of the coming evening, the grounds rolled open before her, unfurling in waves of gentle green, before meeting thousands of acres of virgin woodlands. Clusters of wildflowers dotted the meadows, so different from Vienna's imperial grounds and gardens, where sensible, stately tulips intersected lawns so symmetrical and tight-clipped that it looked as though mankind had healed nature into complete submission, which, of course, in Vienna, it had. Or was it the sound of Gördele at dusk? Evenings out here echoed with the bark of her sheepdogs, the carefree laughter of the Hungarian stable boys as they scrubbed down her horses, the first stirrings of the crickets and frogs as they welcomed dusk from the overgrown fields, nature's unrivalled orchestra tuning up for its nightly symphony. It was a collection of sounds so entirely unlike those to be had in Vienna, where Sisi might hear the 1-2 of polished boots as the imperial guards paraded across the courtyards, the clatter of coaches rolling past the Hofburg gates, the cries of the Viennese mob gathered outside the palace at all hours, begging for her to give them a florin coin or a glimpse of her celebrated silhouette, her legendary hairstyles. Perhaps it was the aroma in the air. Here, a medley of sweet scents travelled across the breeze, the faint trace of wild rose and acacia, the earthy musk of the stables, the heady perfume of overgrown grass and straw and mud. It was a lush bouquet of smells, so natural and pleasing, entirely different from what she might breathe in back in Vienna, where she inhaled the cloying eau de parfum of obsequious courtiers, the stink of so many bodies and chamber pots jammed into the Hofburg Palace, the fear of the noble men and women who were always watching, calculating as to how they might raise their own status or knock down rivals. Yes, fear was something one could smell. Sisi knew that after all of her years in Vienna. But no, it was not the view, or the sound, or the scent that made twilight in Hungary so different from twilight in Austria. It was not anything outside of her, or around her. It was a sensation entirely inside of her. It was how she felt each evening at dusk that made Gördele so different from the Hofburg. In Vienna, by this hour of the day, Sisi would feel withered. Her head would ache from the unpleasantness of an argument with her husband or his iron-willed mother. Sisi's stomach would be coiled into a gnarled mess, her chest tight with anxiety from a day of sorting gossip and rumours from truth, of watching for and trying to address the judgment or disapproval that seemed to pass across every courtier's face. She would be looking drearily ahead to a night spent with the imperial court, a tedious evening, ensconced in the damask and gold gilt of the staterooms, the sound of the violins overpowered by the chatter about trivial scandals. Hours spent watching women fawn before her husband, forcing a weary smile while men paid her the same trite compliments they used night after night. Days in Vienna were long, but the nights were interminable, and Sisi would limp back to her room each evening, feeling spent, depleted, so fatigued that she already dreaded the next day before that day even came. Here in Gördele she felt spent too, but in the best way possible. Like a vessel, poured out, light and free of burdens. Today, like all days at her Hungarian estate, she'd been free. She'd been outdoors since 5 in the morning, having risen at 4. In keeping with her daily routine, she'd ridden hard and returned to the palace just briefly for a light broth at midday. The afternoon found her atop her horse once more, and back in the fields and woodlands, where she practiced jumps, galloped to the point of breathlessness, and joined her charming neighbour, Prince Nicholas Esterhazy, in chasing foxes and racing across the untamed landscape. That was why twilight in Gördele was always so different.